Hello? Let me know if you can hear me and if the volume is okay. What song is the dolphin song? The song is called Realm of Dolphin Overlord. It's a C-punk song from like 2011, and for some reason apparently it doesn't have any copyright on it. I don't know if it's because it was one of those weird Tumblr songs or whatever. But I do want to say hello to Sleepy and hello to Vice the Gallant. Let me know if I pronounced that right. And we are doing an art stream as we did last time. So let me just switch to Clip Studio Paint on OBS. Take this away. There we go, that should show up. Is sounding good? Okay, good. So I'm going to be drawing something again today. I was wondering again what you guys would like to see or anything like that. Last time we did an art stream, we drew Parsley from High Guardian Spice because I'm still stuck in the High Guardian Spice trenches where I've literally put up part 2 last week, which means I have done a video on 6 of the 12 episodes. So I am still neck deep in this show as far as doing reviews on it is concerned, because I've watched the whole thing, obviously, but I have to rewatch episodes more than once while I'm writing the script, and then I have to watch the episode again when I'm taking screen caps based on what I wrote in the script, and then I have to watch it again while I'm editing. So it's a lot of High Guardian Spice. So I don't know if you guys were interested in drawing a different character from there or from something else entirely. I don't know, we could draw like Undertale stuff's always like my fallback, but we could draw maybe some My Little Pony stuff, or I don't know. They announced the new Sailor Moon. What's it called? I guess it's called Sailor Moon Crystal, even though they're not using the Crystal naming convention anymore. But they recently announced Sailor Moon Cosmos, so that's also a thing coming out, so that's quite exciting. But I thought I'd hear if you guys had any ideas, otherwise I'll just fall back on maybe one of the High Guardian Spice characters, just because that's what we did last time, so it would be fun to do another one. And I was thinking of maybe doing Time, because she's pretty cool. She's a very low-key character. We haven't seen too much of her, but I do actually quite like her. I think she's one of the better written characters in the show as far as the main cast is concerned. So I'm going to bring her up, but let me know if you guys are interested in something else, but just so I'm not just sitting here with a blank canvas. Dense watercolor, which size? 70, that's good. So I'm not going to put her in too hectic a pose or too dynamic a pose, simply because she has a bow, but I don't actually have reference for the bow. Believe it or not, trying to find model sheets and like reference material for this show is almost impossible. Just, it's not online. Like, I can find a complete turnaround sheet for Sage, and I can find a basic turnaround for Rosemary where it just shows her front and back, and then otherwise there's zero reference material whatsoever. I don't know if nobody wants to release their reference material just because the show tanked so hard and they don't really want to associate with it, or if I don't think they could like not have reference material. That would be very, very strange, but it makes it very difficult when I'm trying to do the videos, because I would like to bring up reference videos, reference material and reference character sheets and stuff, and it just doesn't exist online. Let me think. Good. I can already tell I'm gonna have to resize this because I started too big. We are drawing on a Huon Canvas 13, and we are using Clip Studio Paint EX, which is the, I don't know how to like describe it. I guess the highest tier, because there are different versions of Clip Studio Paint based on how much you pay. And EX is the like highest priced one. However, it is the one that unlocks unlimited keyframes for animation, which is why I eventually upgraded to it. Okay. Actually, let me use the zoom slider rather than the buttons, because I can control how much it zooms in and zooms out. I don't think she has high heels. No, she doesn't. She has like a wedge heel. The shoulders are going this way, so what you usually do if the shoulders go one way, you have the hips go the opposite way. So her whole shoulder is going to be up here because I want her hand to go on her hip. So this hip has to be lower than the hip here. And because this leg isn't in front, having the hip lower than this one means that you can have this foot come down a little bit further than this foot here. Flip it. And probably extend this leg a little bit further. Oops. There you go. Normally what they tell you to do is to outline the hair shape, especially in characters like her, who have quite prominent hair, but I like to do that after I've done the anatomy for the body, because otherwise it kind of throws off my judgment of how big the head is in comparison with the rest of the body, especially with hair like hers, where if this is her skull, just like that, she has a lot of volume here. That's her hair. So I don't want that getting in the way while I'm trying to just figure out the anatomy of drawing. There we go. She doesn't have much definition in her face. It's pretty much just a straight swoop down. She doesn't have strong cheekbones or anything like that. Which is strange. That's like a part of her character design where you would think they would give her like really sharp cheekbones, but they didn't really. Her ears. Okay. Just gonna spin this. That's more or less where her ear on the other side is gonna be. I think I drew this line skew, but that's fine. It gives me a rough idea at least. No, it's completely wrong. There we go, it's better. I'm coming back to check her nose shape, even though they don't really draw any of the characters' noses with any kind of definition in the show. But she does have like the other characters, they tend to just have a small suggestion of a nose by just doing that. But she has like nostrils, which kind of gives me the impression that her nose is very sharp. It's not like a button nose or anything, which kind of also matches with her character design. I saw a character redesign of Time specifically where the person had given her like very deer-like characteristics, and I really liked that. I felt the design was a little over-designed, but one thing that the show does is it lends itself very well to redesigns, just because I don't want to say the character designs are bad, because they're not actually bad designs. It's just that they're very uninspired, I guess, because you look at like Time, she's just an elf, basically. Like, this could be from any fantasy show. If you look at her original design, she was originally supposed to be white with very, very light blonde hair, and it was just kind of straight down. And she basically looked like a gender bend of Legolas, and that's about it. There was nothing else to the design, so it is very generic. That's the one thing I will say about Rosemary. At least Rosemary's design is interesting for being like a sword focused, action focused character. Is she has the big puffy pigtails and like the big poofy dress, and that is at least something unique for that character design. But considering that Rodriguez also originally designed her to be basically exactly Madoka Magica, it's also like, okay, how original is that design? But it's been evolved beyond just a Madoka Magica lookalike, so that it is kind of unique in its own way. But I get the impression that Rodriguez doesn't care as much about Time and Parsley as he does about Rosemary and Sage, so their designs are kind of just functional. It's like, okay, we need an elf character and we need like a dwarven character, and these are what they look like. I always struggle with like this eye shape, this like very sharp eye shape, because I guess it's just because I don't have enough experience with drawing it, because I always draw like very large-eyed, round-eyed characters, so when it gets to a character with a different eye shape, it's like, oh no, what do I do? Bring it down a bit. Good. I'm actually not sure. Does she have a round pupil, or does she have like a slit cat-like pupil? Let me actually check in my screenshots, because I noticed that Time actually has like really sharp teeth, where they've given her almost vampire teeth, which is quite interesting. They don't really do anything with that character design, but it is part of her character design, which I found pretty interesting. Okay, no, she does just, well, they kind of cat-like. Maybe I should just give her that just because it's interesting. It is at least something about the design which elevates it above just being like a generic elf character. Here we go. This eye is still a little high now that I look at it. Yeah, better. And does she have a... She does have a slight upper lip. I'll bring this down as well. Probably should have done like warm-up sketches before the stream, but oh well, I didn't. Eyebrows. Draw this one. Oh wait, I've actually got her like this. I'm actually going to redraw her pupils looking off to the side, because how I have her currently in this pose, it makes it look like she's posing at the end of a runway. And that's not actually what I want to be going for with this character. It doesn't really suit her. There we go, it's better. Probably just mark the shoulders as well, just to save myself some trouble. Knees will be down here. She has like really long legs, like even though she's proportioned like a teenager, I don't know if it's just because her skirt is really short, but she has really long legs. Yeah, she does, because if you look at her kneecaps are over here, more or less, then you see like this part of the leg is really elongated in terms of anatomy. Like this is way longer than it would actually be in real life for a human being, so she has exceptionally long legs. Now, normally with anatomy, this fly swoops inward and then connects to the kneecap over here, and then you have the shin coming here, and you have the calf muscle here, and then you should have some slight what's the word? You've got a curve this side as well if you're like going 100% following anatomy. However, I actually like that you would keep this line quite straight, so it's just one continuous line. So I'm going to flip it because my hand bends easier this way, and we're going to make this one singular line going all the way up. Even though anatomy wise it's an oversimplification, but it should make for a really nice swoop here. And then I would just make the curves on this side a little bit more pronounced so that she doesn't look emaciated. Because generally you want to pair a straight line with curves. Put that there. So now I'll just make these a little bit more pronounced than I've got them at the moment. So this is the kneecap here, and this is the thigh here, and this is the ankle there. This will come up here, and then it connects here. There we go. And now same here, I'm going to make this one continuous line down. Let's flip it again. Simplification is always the thing I have the biggest problem I have with art, is because I have a tendency where I want to draw all the anatomy like spot on, and I really want to get it in there and get it like super accurate, but sometimes you don't want that and you just want things to be simple. And I think it's just because I enjoy drawing anatomy, so I always put like way too much focus on it when the picture would actually be better off if I just kept it simple. But just because while I'm busy drawing I find it fun, I tend to make things overly complicated. The inside of the leg, it goes up. My phone buzzing. She has a wedge heel, so I'm going to draw the arch first, and then I'm going to draw the heel afterwards, because she's not going to be like flat on the ground, she's actually going to have it like at an angle. Like that, and then you bring this down here, and then she's got a wedge. This is a little too pronounced. I'll bring this down a little bit. Go, next side. Drawing feet like straight head on is something I'm still kind of not the best at. There we go. Should be a little bit more down. Just gonna bring up the straight ruler again. So it's there, so the heel should be there. Okay, also the toe should be down there. I'm just gonna bring it down a bit. Actually, I'm just going to stretch it. Here we go. So this shoulder connects to the collarbone, which goes up here, and then the shoulder should go here. Because I don't want the shoulder to be too far out, otherwise it looks like it's disconnected from her torso. There we go. And her hand goes here, and then we have her fingers clasping the hip here. That's correct. Like this on like this, just checking. Yeah. This goes here, this goes here. I don't think she has much of a chest. No, she doesn't really. So I'm not going to bother drawing one really, because it's something I often struggle with. I don't know why, there's no specific reason for why I struggle with it. It's just not one of my strong points. Arm goes down here. Is that where I had her arm originally? That's way too far down. Yeah, it should be here. Going to twist this ankle a little because at the moment it feels like it's not great, but actually what I'm going to do is, rather than rotate it, I'm going to use the perspective tool and just move the perspective on it so it's like that. There we go, that's better. I'm going to mark this layer as blue so I don't get lost, because some people like actually name their layers as they draw, but I don't know, maybe it's just because I'm working on a tablet and it would require like leaning forward and typing things on the keyboard. I prefer to just not name the layers and I just color code them instead so I kind of know what's going on. So I'm going to do her hair next, just because it is so prominent. Kind of map out what it does. More or less like that. She looks a bit like Chitara from the Thundercats, that's it. Then her fringe. She doesn't really have a fringe, really. She's kind of got one. She's kind of just got 2 hairs, and then the one that connects to this piece coming out in front. So I don't want to go too crazy with it. No, I don't want to do that, because this is all, it's kind of supposed to be one unit of hair. My natural inclination is to kind of really get in there and add a whole bunch of details, but with her specifically, just because the hair is one big enormous unit, you can't really go into super detailing the individual strands like I usually like doing, just because it kind of breaks up her hair being this one massive singular feature of hers. Okay, I'm gonna do her fingers on this. There you go. Just want to make sure I detail how the wrist connects to the arm, because even though we don't really see that much of it, if we get it wrong, it looks like her wrist is broken, which I don't want. That hand's a bit small. I'm just going to enlarge it rather than redraw it. That's better. Making another layer just for the outfit, just because I don't like having the hair and hands on the exact same layer as the outfit, because the outfit kind of ends up covering everything, and then if I need to erase and change something, I'll just end up erasing a whole bunch of her outfit. Now I just realized she has her cloak on in this reference. This is like the only reference image that there is of time at all. Like as far as her model sheet goes, this is all there is. So I'm going to go find a screenshot instead. I'm going to use the one where she goes over to Parsley's house, because I know she's not wearing the school uniform in that one. So there should be an okay reference for her. Just have to find it. Here we go. Use this one. Now her design is actually asymmetrical, so I have to be careful when I flip and such, just to check proportions, that I don't accidentally draw something on the opposite side that it's supposed to be. Does it actually cover? Yeah, it does cover the collar. It comes down from this shoulder, like this. Like that. Check. Okay, yeah, so they're not sleeves in that they cut off at her wrist. They actually do this V thing, and then they connect to her middle finger. Like that. Just put some creases in the material there. And then I don't think her right arm... No, okay, so she's got the bracer on her left arm, but not on her right. Then she has this medallion thing, which I think is a flower now that I look at it, because her mother is a botanist. And I think her father is too. I don't know. Her father also does something with the forest where she's from. Shockingly, it's not really developed very much. It's just kind of mentioned. And then it has like a rope twisting round design. I'm not going to be too detailed with it, because when I resize the image, you're not really going to see these details that much, so I don't need to be too pedantic about them. That's good. Give some indication of material here. There we go. I should probably do it up here as well. Let me just see. Okay. Material. because the material that she wears, it looks quite skin tight, so I don't want to make it look too baggy. I kind of want it to be quite form-fitting. I've made her elbow really pointy. I'm actually going to round that out a bit. Here we go. Outfit follows this. Shoulder. Okay, then she has a skirt. And her skirt, it's not really pleated, but it has these cuts in the side of it, which I think are cuts. I don't know if that's just a design or not, I'm not sure. But I'm going to treat them as if they are cuts in the material, so that it has a slight flare to it. Because that just kind of affects how I think about the material when I'm thinking of putting in creases and things. Like how the material would fall. That's kind of the reason I think about things like what is the cut of the dress. Because if it was pleated, a pleated dress falls completely differently than a midi dress would, or a poofy dress like Rosemary. Because it being cut like this means it's not entirely like a skin tight mini skirt. It's somewhere between a pleated dress and I guess like a cheerleader's outfit, really. And then she kind of has the absolute territory with this much of her thigh showing before we get to the boot, which comes all the way up. So this, let me just double check how I'm thinking about this. Okay, I know. What I'm actually going to do is, because I have this boot like this, I'm actually going to draw like as if it's one continuous curve and make this one kind of the opposite. Like that. I don't want to bring it too down though, because then she's showing a lot of thigh skin, and I don't know, I don't like that. It kind of feels weird, considering she's apparently 14. Although the show itself never says that. Rodriguez just said that in a tweet. And I'm one of those people where I feel like if you need to say something in a tweet afterwards, then it's like how canon it is kind of up for debate, even though you're the creator. There's a line in the movie Shadow of a Vampire where John Malkovich's character says, if it's not in frame, it doesn't exist. And I think about that a lot, and that's kind of my approach to media, is if it's not in the media, then it's canon. Well, I guess some media it can be different, like, because I'm thinking Lord of the Rings, everything that happens in like the appendices of Lord of the Rings is canon to Lord of the Rings, but then you get to like J.K. Rowling and all of the nonsense that she said is canon to Harry Potter, and I just don't really want to think about it because some of it is so stupid and badly written. But since that's the age that Rodriguez gave, and since I don't see any reason not to accept it, that's kind of what I see the characters as. Part of me thinks he only said they were 14 is because that's kind of the default age that a lot of high school anime characters in shoujo are. at least in the first seasons. Like in Sailor Moon, Usagi starts at age 14 and then she's 16 by the end of the show. Took this because it's easier for my hand to draw this way around. Oopsie, this one. She doesn't really have definition. Okay, it does go all the way around. Do that. I'm actually just going to give her a slight crease there. This wedge is kind of really aggressive, so I'm going to make it a bit smaller. There we go. Have a look. I think that's good. I'm wondering whether I should make her hair even bigger than it is, but that might be a slight overkill. It is pretty big though. Maybe. Let me make. I'm gonna duplicate this layer and make it bigger, so that if I screw it up, I don't lose what I had and what was working. Now I could make it bigger with the transform tool, but I want to see what happens if I use the liquefy tool. No, I don't actually want the top because that makes that parting look very strange. I just want to do it around. Make this bigger as well. Okay, that's good. Let's have a look. Oops. Yeah, that's better. Then that's the sketch, so we move on to inking. I'm actually going to make all of these blue because these are all the sketch layer. And make this one red because this is the ink layer. Get my ink. Black. I used to have a custom pen on my old laptop. I think it was this one, but the pressure sensitivity is different on my new laptop, so this pen goes from very thin to very thick very quickly, and I've tried playing around with the pressure sensitivity settings and everything. I've really tried, and I just can't get it to really work the way I want it to, so I've just resorted to using the G pen that comes with Clip Studio Paint because it tends to work just as well. Because it gives me, its variation is not so sudden and drastic, so it gives me like nice line variation without me having to really fight the pen. I always have the pen set at no anti-aliasing because then, like here, I want to fill this with black, and if I do it now, there is no halo, because if you have anti-aliasing on your pen and then you try and fill it, you get like this halo effect in the middle, and it's not good. It just makes your life difficult because then you have to try and deal with that. Whereas when you make the line super crisp by taking off anti-aliasing completely, you don't have that problem, and if you're doing anything for print, you don't want anti-aliasing anyway. Besides, resizing before I upload to the internet, it kind of applies a sort of anti-aliasing effect in the resize anyway, unless I set it to preserve the hard edges, which I don't really do because otherwise you get like an almost MS Paint look. Not that that's bad, but it's not really, it doesn't look great for the kind of art I do, but it's good for things like if you're trying to emulate like the Homestuck look, where it looks like it was drawn in MS Paint specifically, even when it wasn't, then you want to keep the hard edges. But for illustrations like this, it's not really necessary. And I need to switch my eraser to a hard, and I need to take the anti-aliasing off on the eraser as well for the same reason. Otherwise, every time you erase, you are going to cause your lines to have aliasing to them, and then it's going to give you trouble when you get to coloring and things like that. Normally I like giving my characters some slight cheek definition just by adding some lines here. However, it can sometimes give the impression that your character is smiling even though they're not smiling that much, and since Time is quite a serious character, I'm not going to do that for her. As well as her having a pretty elongated face, if you compare to a more round-faced character, and that would, like, you'd rather want to define her cheekbones if you want to play around with her design rather than give you something that might imply a rounded cheek. But I'm not going to play around with that too much just because I don't want to do a complete redesign of hers, because designing isn't my biggest strength really. I'm an animator, right? So you give me the character designs and I animate the character. Designing the character is not my biggest forte. So if I were to redesign the characters, I would just have to spend like a good day finding reference material for what kind of redesign I would want to do, and then take inspiration from those elements rather than try and redesign them off the top of my head, because I'm not entirely sure I could do that. Or I might be able to, but I don't feel confident enough to do it without any sort of guidance whatsoever. That being said, there are some people out there that do amazing redesigns of these characters. Like, there's some really good ones. And apparently somebody on YouTube mentioned that there are people who are also doing rewrites of the show just as a hobby, because I saw that there's a YouTuber called Unicorn of War. And Unicorn of War is an ex-fan and a big criticizer of the show RWBY. And he is actually doing a lot of like rewrites for the entire seasons of RWBY, and just kind of taking what he liked about the show originally and reapplying it in the seasons where he felt the show really dropped the ball. And I'm seeing people doing that with High Guardian Spice, where they can see potential in the show, but they're very frustrated with how the show came out. So they kind of just do a rewrite to capitalize on what the show did right and kind of do away with most of it that the show just did not use properly. It's also why I'm somebody, I'm not always like, oh, this shouldn't exist, because even if something is really, really bad, it can give somebody really nice groundwork to build a better idea on. Even if it's just for YouTube, and even if it's just to kind of talk about it, it's not something that you yourself could turn into like a different show. I still think that has a lot of value to it. I'm actually going to fill this lip and then I'll recolor it later. Just because it is one of the most... It's a unique part of her character design that none of the main characters have really, is the very defined upper lip. This is also why I like having a line variation to the pen I use, because when I get into the smaller details I don't press as hard and I don't use the side of my stylus. But when you get to this part of the character where it's literally nothing to look at here except the outer line of the arm, and because of the tablet I use I can do it in one stroke, I want to give it like a really strong bold line just to make it very clear where the character stops and where the negative space ends. I don't know if that really makes sense, but that's just kind of how I think about it. I'm gonna turn it the other way. There we go. Sorry, don't want to make you guys sick. I'm not really bothering to define the line here so much because it's on the far side of her, and there's a lot going on here because it's got the creases of the clothes and the end of the belt. So I'm just kind of suggesting that that's where the arm kind of goes behind the skirt, but I'm not drawing the line to physically touch anything, just because it might muddy up the design and make it confusing as to what's actually going on. I think she's one of the few characters who doesn't actually have painted nails. No, she doesn't. They define her nails, but they don't actually have her nails painted. I tend to only really define the nails if the nails are painted, and even then I just kind of suggest it. But I think when I draw hands in close-up, I might start defining the nails more, which is something I don't really do anymore. It's not really something I've done before, but if I look at the kind of art that I really like, and I see that's a feature in a lot of art and character design I like, then I feel that that's something I should try and incorporate into my own art and see how I feel about it. That's my phone again. Let me actually move it away from the microphone. Here we go. Let me actually save, because I haven't done that yet. Normally I would save all the time, but I just don't want to save like every 5 minutes like I usually do. Otherwise, you guys will just have to sit through like save. Okay, so now I'm not actually going to draw these bandages or whatever they are, these straps like this, because like I said, I want to keep this one as one continuous line. So I'm going to do it this way. Stabilization is at 15. Okay. It's too thin. Yeah. There we go. You turn on the stabilization here, by the way. And what that does is, if you've got a shaky hand, it just kind of smooths it out a little bit. The higher you put the stabilization, the more delay there is between your strokes and what the program registers. But it can be a lifesaver for moments like this where I don't really want to zoom in too much because I want to do one continuous line. So it just smooths out any shakiness that I might have. Turn it this way. You can do this with the pen tool as well, like you can do a curve, but when you do it with the pen tool, it doesn't give you any line variation, which is fine if that's your art style, but I really like very obvious line, what's the word? Like a very thin and thick line, depending on where I am on the drawings. So I don't like using the pen tool unless I absolutely have to, because otherwise the line will just be a uniform width and it can be very boring to look at. There we go. Flip it again. I think that's... no, it's not everything. I missed her hair up here. Not that thick. There we go. I think that should be everything. Let's have a look. Ah, no color. I think she also has some stitching here. Let me just... where's her collarbone? There we go. She has some stitching here? Yes, she does. Now I think that's everything. Good look. Clothes, hair, yeah, it's everything. Okay, so now we're going to throw down some coloring, but first I'm going to lock the line layer so that I don't mess that up. Make it green. I'm going to color drop my colors from this drawing just because I think she's really saturated in this one, so I'm not going to use that one. I'm going to use this one instead. I'm going to switch the pen to the turnip pen and turn it. The anti-aliasing there as well in case I want to use the full. Make it smaller. As I've said before, I don't really use the full buckets because you can set it so that on a separate layer you tell the full bucket to only fill in a different layer, but I find that it gives me more problems than it fixes when I use that option, so I tend to do it this way and then just delete the spill afterwards. Oh, this as well. It's a hole here. There we go. One thing I will say, if you've got a tablet and you can remap the buttons, remap one of them to be the eyedropper tool instead of like making the brush bigger or smaller, because I find I use the eyedropper tool a lot more than I use a button to change the size of a brush, when I can literally just press down here to change the brush size. Whereas the eyedropper tool, if you set it to a button, if you hold the button down, it doesn't even really switch to the tool. It only enables that tool while you've got the button pressed down. So it's much faster to switch between the brush tool or whatever you're using to draw and the eyedropper. Oopsie. There you go. Have this a bit big, let me make it smaller. Like I said, you'd think the bucket tool would be faster, and it's faster for doing the flats like this, but then the second you try and do any kind of shading, it causes problems. So even though it looks like I'm really having to fiddle with it, it just saves me a lot of trouble in the long run, even if it takes a little bit longer during this stage of the drawing. Okay, and see, because I have anti-aliasing turned off for the paintbrush, I can now use the bucket and just do that, and it won't have any halos or anything, and then I can just clean up the spills like this when I get here. I think her eyebrows are darker. Okay, her eyebrows are not darker than her hair, but I'm actually going to make it darker because I tend to make eyebrows slightly darker than the hair, just to give them distinction from the hair. And in animation, eyebrows are important for expression, so you kind of want them to stand out rather than have them blend into her hairline. Okay, I'm going to guess they made her eyes just straight white. Yep. Yeah, kind of. But I like making them a little bit darker just because it makes the eye shine pop when you add it. Okay. Just check. Oh, it's a different green. Okay, so this is all the same brown, so I don't need to switch back when I do the boots. I can just do all of it at once. Clip Studio Paint has this new thing. Well, I don't know how new it is, but it wasn't there when I originally bought the program. Depending on how you hold your stylus affects how the pressure of the pen is. And since I've switched to a tablet with a screen, I tend to hold my pen a lot more on its side because I don't want to carve into the screen while I draw, which is kind of what I used to do with my Wacom. But as a result, it also means that my lines in Clip Studio Paint automatically try and be a lot thicker than I sometimes want them to be. So that's kind of something I'm still trying to adjust to. No, it's eraser. There we go. I think the heel is a different color. Yes. I'll go in and do that in a sec. See? Is her collar... I closed that one. Oh well, I'm just going to assume her collar is the same darker green than the sleeves and the slits on the dress is. So I'm going to color it that color. Because in animation you don't really want too many colors on one design because it can start looking really cluttered. And depending on what program you're using to animate, it can be difficult to keep track of all your colors in your palette for a single character. I actually don't know what program they use to animate High Guardian Spice. The majority of the animation was done in Korea, and I don't actually know what program is most common in Korea. Because like Toei Studios in Japan actually uses Clip Studio Paint for a lot of their projects. But I don't know if it's the same for Korean animation, and I don't know if it's the same for DR Movie, who is the Korean animation studio who worked on the show. So I don't think they use programs that the West uses. Oops, it's my phone. Just ignore that. It's an alarm, it's not a message. And I'm wondering about the animation because depending on what program you use depends on how it handles color and what kind of palettes. Because here I'm using the RGB selector here, but you can actually build entire palettes like this for certain characters. And I'm wondering if that's how they do it at Toei, rather than using the eyedropper the way I am, whether they just build palettes for characters depending on the scene. Because depending on what the lighting in a scene is, depends on how you're going to cut its character. And I wonder if they just build it that way. The only downside is doing it in Clip Studio Paint this way is if you need to replace a color, you have to manually do it with the paint bucket tool. Whereas in other programs, you can select the color in the palette and say replace color with different color, and it'll do it automatically and kind of apply that to the animation itself. And the end of her sleeve here. Oopsie. There we go. Okay, so that's all the flats done. Now, because in the line work I didn't use anti-aliasing on the lines and I've got the close gap set pretty high here, I can just select the line work like this and I can delete all the spills without there being behind like halos and things like that, which I don't want. However, I also see it's not closing the gap on the sleeve here, so what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to use the eraser to erase the spill rather than just hit delete. Otherwise, I'm going to have to redo all this. So I'm just going to use a large eraser and just avoid that part of the sleeve and make sure I don't leave behind any excess dirt of the base color. See, now I can just go in and erase whatever's left without having to get like delete all this green I've got here. So this is supposed to be this. This is supposed to be erased like this. There we go. And here as well. And that's the flats. Now, I'm not going to do intensive shading. I'm going to lock that layer. But I'm going to just add a little bit of shading here and there. Make it purple. Specifically on the eyes, because at the moment it's kind of whoa. So I'm just going to give it some definition here. Grab green here. And I'm not going to use the pen tool because I want it to be slightly smoother than that. So I'm going to use the brush tool just to give it a slight softness to it so that there's not a very harsh transition between the greens here. And it makes it a slightly more organic. And then if I wanted to, I can even go to the blend tool and use blend. And then just slightly blend it in there. And she doesn't really have it, oh no she does. I was going to say she doesn't really have a lighter color in her eye, but I see she actually does, which is great because I generally add that just because it gives the eye a little bit more depth to it. And now I'm going to add a shadow to the white. I don't actually know. One character design that I would do is I would give her, like, if it were me, I would make specifically Time's eyes glow slightly in the dark just because she's an elf, and I think that would be a cool character design, but I don't actually know if they did that. In one of the upcoming episodes I'm going to talk to, a lot of it takes place at night, and I don't remember her eyes really doing that, but I think that's something that I would think would look quite cool if it were me designing the show. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the pencil and give it a slight light here of orange. There we go. See how that looks. I don't want this pencil. Actually, what I want is the marker, not the pencil. That's too red. There we go. There we go. Now, on top of the line work, we just use the pen and give it some anti-aliasing. Do that. There we go. Oopsie, not what I meant to do. There we go. And now the other thing I want to give some shading to is the hair. Let's grab this one as well. Grab the paintbrush. Let's see. No, I don't want to use that one. Let's use rough wash and see what it gives me. Yeah, it's nice. Let's go with that. We use the blend tool and we're just going to blend it a little bit, but not too much because otherwise we're going to lose this painterly effect. Just to not make it as dark and it changes from one color to the other. And now we give some highlights. I actually have a brush that I downloaded specifically to do highlights. Because I can do them by hand, but I tend to like the highlights that other people have come up with. Oh, that's feathers. See, I like this one, that's cool. And now I'm just going to give her some shading on her skin. And I'm going to hide the outline so it doesn't bother me. The shading on her skin in the actual model sheet isn't too intense, but I'm actually going to make it a little bit darker and redder just so that it's more prominent. Use paintbrush. I thought I fooled this. I must have accidentally undone it. It's fine, I'll put it back in a sec. Oops. Okay, now I've got a brush here, which is two tones, so I'm going to make this one this color, and then I'm going to make the bottom quite red. And then what that's going to do with the two-toned brush, it's going to give it a slight edge. Oh, I didn't click that. There we go. Now I can go in and color the rest of it. And then use the blend tool to blend together. There's probably a faster and easier way to do it, but very often I'm lazy, and once I find a way to do something that works, I don't really look into is there an easier way to do it, because I'm like, oh well, this works. Kind of blend that together as well. I hit save for a sec. There we go. And then I'm going to give her some slight redness to her cheeks, just because it kind of brings a little bit of life to a character's face. Okay, there we go. That's too much. Too big. There we go. And then I'm going to erase it just slightly because it is quite strong. I think I have my soft brush set. Okay, there we go. Better. Just kind of erase it a little bit. So it doesn't look like she's blushing, but just so that there's slight color there. And then what I like to do is I like to use the hard brush, give it some anti-aliasing, and then just kind of do that. Oh, and what I want to do here is, I'm not going to do it here where I color everything in the line art, but I do want to color the upper lip. And it's kind of black here, but I am going to color it a different color here. Make it slightly darker, there we go. Pen. There we go. And I think just last thing before I get carried away and start coloring everything, as I just want to give a slight shadow here. I'm going to use the two-tone brush for this again. No. Here we go. And I'm not going to make it red because it's not against her skin. So I'm actually going to make it, maybe a slightly yellower. See if that works. Nah, not really. I'll make it blue. That could work. And then I just go in and like play around with it. And then last thing which I'm going to do, because again, I could go in and just color and keep messing with it forever. But I think for now, another thing which is an easy way to give a character just a little bit of depth is to make a layer on top of everything and set it to overlay. And then go to gradient, and I'm going to do like a teal colored. Make it quite dark, but not very saturated. And then do this. Actually, it's going to be confusing unless I show you what I'm doing. So let me select everything except the background. There we go. And inverse, like that. So now, if you do the overlay and you use the gradient, you can just do this. And it gives a slight shadow there, and then if you go to a color like this, oh yeah, it's fine. Like that, and then what you do is you just turn down the opacity quite a bit, and then it just kind of gives a slight bit of depth, because it shows you this is the bottom, this is the top, because at the bottom you've got the ground, and then at the top that's obviously where the light source is coming from usually, so it just kind of gives her a slight sense of, okay, this is up, this is down. And there we go! Something else that I could do is duplicate the flats, let's duplicate there, put it underneath, unlock it, and then give it a slight ring, and then make the edge like that. And instead of white, we can keep it white, or we can give her like a slight green just because of her color scheme. Yeah, and then we just delete what we don't want. And there we go, and then when you put a background behind her, it just kind of makes her pop a little bit. And then because this is the edges on a separate layer, you can turn the opacity down if you want it to not be as striking, and you can play around with it, and it gives you a little bit more control. And now our last thing is just to sign it, and I tend to color or use the eyedrop on a color within the drawing already, just so that the signature doesn't pop out too much. And just sign it somewhere close to the face. And date it. And there we go. Oopsie. And that is time. I'm gonna hit save. And there we go. And that took an hour and almost 2 hours, about an hour and 50 minutes, maybe an hour and 45 minutes. So now, oh geez, I just saw for the first time, sorry guys, I had my chat open in a different bar, and I've been keeping it open to see if there are people where I can respond to the chat, and I see for the first time it has been showing me my video feed, but it has not been showing me the live chat. So I thought nobody was talking. I'm so sorry. Hi, I see the chat now. If you guys wanted to ask questions or say anything, I'm here now. I can actually see you. That's really annoying. I'm gonna have to next time be aware that having the chat that way, because that's how I used it last time and it actually worked fine, but it seems like this time it just decided to not do that. So I'm very sorry. I hope it was interesting, even though I wasn't really answering you guys, but I will sort that out next time. But I'm not in a rush to be anywhere, so if you guys had questions or things you wanted to ask, if you had questions or if there's something you wanted to ask, same thing. If you wanted to give opinions on, I don't know, High Guardian Spice itself or the art or anything like that, I can answer them because I'm not in a rush to run off. Am I learning Japanese? You know what? I am and I'm not. I know sentence structure, I know verbs, and I know how to switch between polite form and conversational form. And I can read hiragana, I can sort of read katakana, and there are a few kanji I know. My biggest problem is learning the vocabulary, because the only way to really learn vocabulary is through memorization. And I really struggle with that because I have to find a way to memorize words without just reading them in a list, because this is going to sound like very weird unless you know what I'm talking about. I actually have ADHD, so to study is very difficult for me to do it in a traditional, like, scholar way, to just sit down and read. Oh, this is what this means. This is what this means. Like, the information doesn't stick in my brain when I do that. So I have to kind of figure out a way to get the vocabulary embedded in my brain without doing it in a school book way. I do watch a man on YouTube called, I think he's just called Yuta, Yuta, and he said he learned English as a Japanese speaker by watching a lot of English media. He said he watched a lot of Friends, and he would not turn on Japanese subtitles, and he would just watch the show in English, and he would just try and pick up the language that way. So that's one thing that I think is a way I can work on the vocabulary. The only problem is I watch a lot of things while I'm working, and I can't really study a language and work at the same time. So that's something I'm working on. And so yeah, I am kind of learning Japanese, but I'm not learning it in an academic studying kind of way. And I've kind of been ignoring getting on it a little bit more just because I've been focusing on work so much. And it can be quite exhausting. You're trying to watch Astro Boy, the 1980s one in raw Japanese. That's actually a very good idea. Because like I said, this man Yuta, I think that's his YouTube name, is Japanese guy Yuta. That's how he learned English. And his English in his videos is super, super fluent. Because what he does is he has a YouTube channel that's focused on an English-speaking audience, whereas he as a Japanese person can go to the general public and interview them and ask them questions. Like, he had a whole video asking random Japanese people on the street if they knew what city pop was. So that was very interesting. And that's how he learned English. So I just need to do more of that. My brother learned a lot of Japanese through years of watching subtitled anime. Yes. Yuta says that subtitles can work, and I mean, I've picked up Japanese words that way, and the Disney version of Kiki's Delivery Service drives me crazy because a lot of the subtitles in English don't match what they're actually saying in Japanese. And I was kind of proud of myself for realizing this, but at the same time it makes that DVD really frustrating to watch. But Yuta said to try and watch without subtitles, or maybe even turning the subtitles to Japanese subtitles, because then you see the hiragana and kanji as well as hear the language. And just kind of doing it that way until you eventually start picking things up. Hatim Hamid says, Hi. I'm glad to see you. You probably came in at a good time because my recording or streaming software just totally let me down. And I couldn't see that people were chatting at me while I was working because I thought the chat was frozen. So hi, you came at a good time. By the way, do you think that Time's Lone Wolf characterization doesn't make any sense or is poorly executed? I think it does make sense for her character because she has home troubles with her mother and father. I think that her being very standoffish against other people works. However, it means because she's not talking to the other characters about the rot that's affecting the forest she's from, you need a character to prompt her to open up about that. And what the show has done is it's made Rosemary and Sage the main focus, and they have no interest in talking to Time because they don't really like Time. So the only character who talks to Time is Parsley, but Parsley isn't really the character who's very proactive about that kind of thing. Because Sage struggles with the magic system, she would have to be the character who opens and befriends Time so that Time can talk to her about the rot so that Sage can then bring the magic system into the plot. But none of that is happening. Like, none of that happens in the show whatsoever. So I don't think it's poorly executed or doesn't make sense. I just think that the dynamic doesn't make sense. Not so much the character as much as how the group operates. It's poorly done as a whole. But if you had taken Time's character and put her in another show, it would have worked fine. Because she reminds me a lot of the manga version of Sailor Mars, who's a lot like her. And I mean, Sailor Mars works fine. So it's kind of the group dynamic that doesn't work, not so much her character. Well, he does watch more fan subs than official subs. That's actually also good because fan subs, what fan subbers will do is they won't translate. They'll translate things a lot more literally, and then they'll put like subnotes that explain what things mean. Whereas official translations, they're trying to keep the flow and they're trying to kind of keep the mood going. So they kind of change slightly what characters are saying so that they don't have to explain a lot of things. So yeah, ironically, watching fan subs is actually the better method of learning Japanese that way. I think this problem could also be fixed a little if Parsley's blacksmithing was magical in some way. Like if it was like alchemy. Yeah, because that's the thing. Parsley is not a magically inclined character. And because of this, even though she's friends with Time, her befriending Time doesn't really tie into the rot in any kind of way. Because even if Time were to tell Parsley about the rot, what is Parsley supposed to do about it? The only thing that Parsley can do is then go to Rosemary and Sage, which again makes her a very good candidate for the main character. But again, the show decided to focus on Rosemary and Sage instead, and neither of them really work. It doesn't really fit together very well. Oh, I never thought of the parallels between Time and Sailor Mars. When I first saw Time's characterization, I thought maybe she was loosely inspired by a Homura Akemi. You know what? Now that you say that, she probably was. And the reason why I say that is because Rosemary is very obviously a mix between a self-insert for Rodriguez and Madoka. Because if you look at Rosemary's original design, I just want to see if I've got a picture of it. It's very obviously Madoka Magica. Here it is. Let me just drop it into OBS. Drop it here. So this is Rosemary's original design. I think this is one of the first drawings. It's the first drawing that Rodriguez applied online. Oh, let me transition. There we go. Oh, there she is. So, because Rosemary is very obviously inspired by Madoka, it makes sense, but it also makes me wonder. I was wondering with this while I was drawing how invested Rodriguez was in Time's character, because it's very obvious he was very invested in Rosemary and he was very invested in Sage. And it feels like Parsley and Time, he wasn't super invested in as characters. Because Time went through so many design changes, it kind of feels like he wasn't very married to what she looks like. I don't know really if that makes sense, and this is just me guessing, I don't actually know. But it makes me wonder how much of Time's character was influenced by Rodriguez and how much of her was contributed by other writers who were working on the show. But it could be that she's inspired by Homura. The only reason why I don't think so is because then I would feel like Rodriguez would have her interact with Rosemary a lot more. Ironic, because Rose and Sage are worse than Parsley and Thyme. They are. I'm trying to think. I might have to think about it as I'm watching more, but I actually think that Rosemary and Sage are the two most unlikable characters in the show, except for that one teacher who we see quite often, the old lady, I forget her name, who, like, she's horrible. She's just a horrible person, and she makes absolutely no sense. We see that later on in episodes, but the first thing she does is she turns everyone into animals and she wants them to fix the problem, and she's like cackling like an evil villain while she's doing this. And then she's like, she almost kills a student in a later episode, and then she's feeding rats to a carnivorous plant, and she's just terrible. So she's probably the worst character in this show, but Rosemary and Sage are some of the most unlikable characters in the show, especially Sage. And believe it or not, even though I've shown you a lot of bad things she does in part 2 of the reviews I'm doing, she gets worse. Like, she actively gets worse and does worse things than she's already done. Like Ray needed an actual plot outside of Rosemary finding her mom and deciding to wing it to get to what they really wanted to write about. Yeah, that's the other thing. I think somebody commented on the video that they felt like the story with the rot was a very fast add-on, like a last addition to the writing. And I can see that, but from the tweets that I was able to find that one of the storyboarders said, is they started animating episodes 1 and 2 before they had finished the script. And to me, if that's the case, that means they were probably having to write chronologically because they were behind on schedule. So they had to immediately start writing episode 3 because that was the next episode they had to work on. But again, that's just a guess based on my own experience with studios and how they work. Animation studios, unlike live action studios, tend to work more or less chronologically because it's on airing, like when you air an episode. Oh, hey, me and my guests are hi! God, what if Sage was inspired by a childhood friend Ray had? If Rose was inspired by his kid self? I don't actually know. That's like really horrifying to think about. With my review series, I'm trying very hard not to focus on who the writers are as people and how that affected the writing, even though that's kind of the opposite of what I normally do, because I like looking at a piece of writing or such and seeing how it informs me about the author. But I'm trying so hard not to do that just because in this case, this show has such a reputation for its agenda and the people who write it, that I feel the quality of the writing itself hasn't been focused on a lot. So I'm trying very hard not to be like, oh lord, I bet the reason Sage is like this is because of X, Y, and Z. Even though I've got some ideas, I just feel like let's not focus on that too much. If you're really trying to do the same as Madoka Magica, that will explain why there's violence in it. Yes, it does. It does actually explain it, and it's very strange because there's like no violence in the show whatsoever. And then in episode 5, the characters start swearing, and then suddenly in episode 7, like, we start seeing violence. It's very strange. I'm actually going to talk about it in part 4, which is the final part. Like, who was this show made for? Because it's written like it's made for kids, but then it starts introducing like very heavy violence. And it's like, who is this made for? The tone is all over the place. Can you draw MC pose? I'm very sorry, Kevin. I'm actually done with the drawing part for now because of my time zone. And also, I'm not entirely sure who that is. But thank you very much, and thank you for coming. Sudden crab blood everywhere. Yeah, that's the next episode. It's very strange. I honestly have no idea why or how they made Sage so unlikable when her archetype usually isn't this toxic. Yes, and like I said, I'm trying very, very hard not to focus on what this says about the writers of the show. But it's very obvious that whoever her main character writer was did not realize that the way they were writing her was making her a terrible person. Now, that doesn't mean that the writer who wrote her is a terrible person. That just means that the writer is inexperienced. Because, like, her making fun of Snapdragon, because, I'm going to say he, just because we haven't gotten there in the writing yet. But, he is a boy, so she's like, oh, you're a boy, so you don't understand what friendship is. Like, that was written for her to be in the wrong there. However, we see in a later episode upcoming when we start dealing with Snapdragon's gender that the reason why that is seen as a bad thing as far as the show is concerned is not because Sage is being mean to a boy for being a boy. It's bad because Snapdragon is actually a trans girl, and that's why it's bad. So it's like, even when you're trying to write the character as being awful, you inadvertently make her worse. It's fascinating how bad it's written. Classic American subtlety. Yeah, I don't want to get in trouble, but again, who was this show made for? Because it's so obvious in a lot of its writing. It's like, is this for kids who wouldn't pick up on the subtleties if you made it subtle? But if it is written for kids, why is there so much violence in it? Snapdragon deserves better. Snapdragon deserves a better show. Snapdragon is genuinely a good character who's written pretty well. Like, there's very little about Snapdragon I can complain about. Even, looking back on it, and I'll have to rewatch, well, I am going to rewatch the later half of the show as I'm writing the script, but I don't have any memory of him doing, I'm saying him again, but again, it's because I want to kind of make it a surprise, sort of, when we start dealing with the gender identity, and then I'll switch to she, but, he doesn't do anything in the show that I can remember offhand, which makes me go, oh, well, that's not very nice. And when he's kind of being really mean at the beginning of the show, it's because he's supposed to be a bully. So it's fine. It's kind of like Amarilla's. She's such a huge bitch, but she's supposed to be a bully, so it's fine. So the fact that she's awful, especially in the earlier episodes, it's fine, because she's supposed to be just a bully and, like, making fun of the other characters. So you end up kind of just enjoying how mean she is. Whereas Sage, you're not supposed to think that she's as mean as she is. And it's like I said, it's what I do like about this show is that the mistakes it makes are so complex in why they are mistakes that it's interesting to talk about, because it's not just a case of, oh, well, this is just trash, this is badly written, they didn't know how to make character and dialogue flow. It's the mistakes are such where you can really discuss them, rather than just say, oh, well, that's bad, and have nothing to talk about. And I do find that very interesting about the show, at least. Let me just grab some water here. It also makes the show frustrating, because if it was just a bad show, you could just go, okay, well, that show's terrible, and kind of move on with your day. But because there are characters like Snapdragon and Amaryllis and Parsley and Time, who are genuinely interesting characters, who are interesting to watch, there's like a good show hidden in this bad show. It's just that the bad things about the show are bad on such a foundational level that you can't easily fix it in a second season. Like, you can't go in and say, okay, we'll just tweak what went wrong and it's a good show now, because the problems are at such a basic writing level where you basically would have to start all over again to get the show to be good, as it were. And it makes it frustrating, because you're like, you're not going to see Amaryllis or Snapdragon in another show because they belong to High Guardian Spice, so you're not going to see these characters again. And it's frustrating. Especially because we don't have a lot of trans characters in shows. Not Amaryllis, obviously, but like Snapdragon, we don't really get trans characters in shows. At least not American ones. There are quite a lot of trans characters in anime. but not really America. So it feels like this show didn't get a Bible or proper pre-production. I don't think it did, because how it's so, again, this is why it's fascinating. Rodriguez had a storyboard which he took to Federline Studios, and he asked Nickelodeon, like he pitched the show to Nickelodeon, and Nickelodeon rejected it. So then he took it to Crunchyroll, and they accepted it. But the thing is, how do you have a storyboard for a show and not have episode 1 and 2 already written? And like I said while I was drawing, I have not found any model sheets for some of the characters. Like, you have full model sheets for Sage, you have a half model sheet for Rosemary. There's no model sheet for Parsley that I could find, and there's only that one drawing of Time, and that's it. And Snapdragon, they have some basic character poses, but that's it. So it makes me wonder, did you guys not have model sheets? Because I can't believe that. It's like, I don't know. I really don't know. There's no build-up to the end, to any part of the story. Everything comes randomly, like how you imagine your own fantasy showing in your head without any kind of planning. Yeah, no, that's very true. Like, again, because they started episode 1 and 2 before those scripts were even complete, it does feel like they were writing it as they go, and they had no, like, overall plan of what the plot is. So they were just kind of writing it as they went, and they're like, oh, what if this happens? Okay, now what if this happens? And then this happens. And instead of taking things they added in episode 3 or 4 and then building upon that, they just kept adding things and were like, okay, now do this, okay, now do that, and hoping it would come together. And I don't know. This is why when you have an idea for a story, have the, like, you work from the overall to the specific. You work from the big picture to the details. You work from the outside in. This is true with animation, it's true with art, it's true with writing a story. You saw me drawing Time. I started with a rough sketch of what the entire pose is going to be, and then I went in and slowly zoomed in on, okay, now I'm doing the head and the body, now I'm doing the hair, now I'm focusing in on what the designs in the clothes are. You work from the general to the specific. And it doesn't feel like that's what they did in the writing at all. They just kind of fudged their way through it until they reached the end of episode 12. I think Ray should take more writing classes to improve his skills, not gonna lie. If he wants to make professionally made series, he should take it seriously. Yeah, I fully agree. Me and some of my friends who work in the industry often lament about this. What very often happens is you have people who have animation degrees, but they don't have creative writing degrees, but then they end up being show writers. And this was a big problem with Rebecca Sugar when she was doing Steven Universe. And Steven Universe came out relatively okay, but you can tell that Rebecca Sugar does not have a degree in creative writing. And for a very large degree of it, she also kind of fumbled her way through it until it started clicking. But it's you can just tell the people that were doing the main writing were not students of creative writing. They were animators and storyboarders who were now doing writing, which is a completely different skill set. And you see that a lot in a lot of modern cartoons, where you have non-writers working on the story, and it really doesn't work. And then the problem is they often make shows that are progressive, so that people who finally have some representation they feel like they have to support the show because it's finally giving them something which they've never had before. And because the writing is mediocre, they kind of just have to put up with it. And it's a shame. It's a big shame. The show looks like a first draft that needs polishing, brainstorming to become a complete show. There was a lot of good ideas. There were a lot of good ideas. There continues to be a lot of good ideas. And episode 6 is the best episode in the show. But even after episode 6, there are some good ideas here. It's just none of them were given time to get fleshed out to any degree. High Guardian Spice isn't a series, it's a rough draft of a series. It really is. Like, this is what High Guardian Spice actually is what Rodriguez should have when he was pitching the show. Like, all of these episodes should have been written as they are currently, and then he should have taken that and then gone to places like Nickelodeon or Cartoon Network or Crunchyroll and said, here, this is the kind of show I want to write. And then once he got the show picked up, then he goes in and refines it and gets like a writing team together and they workshop what he's got and they flesh it out. But yeah, it's just it's a mess. it's a big mess. And this is why it's important to specialize in your field when you're in animation. As I was saying while I was drawing, I'm an animator, I'm not a character designer, and because of that, I focus on animation. I don't focus on trying to design characters and animate them and write the show and storyboard it. I focus on the animation part of it. And even though I am able to do things like storyboard and things like that, that's not my strongest point. So it's not the point I focus on. I focus on the animation and working on getting better with that. Now, there are freaks who are able to do like all three at once, but those are usually the people that go on to be like legends, like Craig McCracken and Gendy Tartakovsky, and who else? Yeah, sorry guys, it's late at night, so my brain is not working. But you get what I mean. Like, you have these big name animators who are able to run a show and be good at it. Like Craig McCracken is a great example. He's an excellent animator and an amazing character designer, and he's also a good writer, and that's why he has all these hits like the original Powerpuff Girls and Wander Over Yonder and Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends and Cosmic Kid. And even like his wife Lauren Faust was the head writer for My Little Pony Friendship is Magic for a lot of the early seasons. And Craig McCracken is actually the person who designed Discord, because they were married, so he kind of helped her with some of the character designs, and he's the one who designed Discord. So you have people like that, but most people, it's better to look at what your strength is in the animation industry and focus on getting very good at that, and then focusing and selling yourself to studios, being like, hey, I am an animator, I want to get hired doing the animation. Whereas Rodriguez, I don't think he's one of those people where he's good with everything. Grab some water. Faust and McCracken are the cartoon power couple. They really are. Like, I haven't seen that much of Faust's work apart from My Little Pony, but Faust actually helped on Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, and she even helped with Dexter's Laboratory. I'm convinced the episode of Dexter's Laboratory where Dee Dee is imagining herself as a My Little Pony, I am convinced Faust was the one who worked on that show with that concept. Because if you look at the way the ponies are drawn in that episode versus Friendship is Magic, it's not that big a jump in art style. So I think that was her. If I ever get a chance to ask her, I would do that. I don't know where I would meet her, but that is a question I would ask her. I still need to watch Kid Cosmic. My friend tells me it's very good. Actually, me and my guester, if you're still in chat, you're the one who keeps telling me to watch that, and I really need to. I wonder what Ray's strong point / speciality actually is. I don't actually know, because shockingly, he doesn't have a lot of credits in terms of animation before High Guardian Spice. He worked on some adult animation for Fox called ADHD, is what the show is called. And he didn't work on every episode, but he worked on a few of them. And those episodes, they look really bad, but it's a straight to YouTube adult animation series. So I'm not going to complain or judge him too much, because adult animation in general doesn't have the best quality animation. So that might have just been a limitation. But apart from that, he doesn't really have a lot of credentials, which is also why I felt, oof, being put in the position of running a show when you have like zero experience, that's very hard. That's very difficult. He seems to be decent in being an illustrator. Sort of. I agree and I disagree, because I will show you with some of the stuff I have downloaded of his, just because I grabbed things for use in High Guardian Spice in case I'll need them. So this is one of his drawings that he did recently from his blog. Oops, let me just resize it. So this is one of his more recent drawings, and it's quite nice. It's very nice, and I like it a lot. It's very cute. But then you look at some of his other work. He did a drawing recently. I was just looking at it earlier. Let me see if I can find it. High Guardian Spice. See if I can find it the way I found it earlier today. And I didn't download it because I was like, no, I'm not going to make fun of him for this. And it didn't really seem relevant, and now I need it. No, not that one. Here we'll go to his Tumblr, because I know it's up there. I'm going to jump to his newest stuff. Once my laptop loads, come on. Where is it? I saw it earlier. Here we go. Save this and say, yeah, that one will be fine. And the other one I saw was this one here. Click on this and save this. Okay, I'm back at the live stream. And see, this is like this drawing of High Guardian Spice that I've got on screen now. That's quite nice, and I like that. I think it's quite cute. But then you look at some of the art he's done just for himself. Like, this is for his, like, original writing. Just transition this. And just, it's fine. But, like, he's got the hand isn't doing it for me. And at the same time, there's issues with the face. And the other drawing is this one, which he did recently for New Year. So this one is a few months old. And if you look at like Amaryllis's posture, it's very flat. And you can see Slime Boy here is off balance completely. And Snapdragon here, I do like that she's wearing the trance colors, but also she's also off balance. I'm not really sure what's going on with Amaryllis's legs here. And Olive is off balance. And Caraway is off balance. So yeah, he's an okay illustrator. He's fine. But if I were to show you something, so this is Rodriguez, who is the one headlining a show. And this, let me just jump back to where I was. And this is some art done by Kiana, who also is just been promoted to a director. And this is just something she drew in her free time. And if you look just at this quick doodle she did, if you look at the quality of the illustration versus Rodriguez's drawing. These are both people headlining a show. And Kiana is younger than Rodriguez is. But Kiana is one of those freaks. Like, I think she graduated high school at like age 16 or 17 and immediately went into animation and immediately got hired by Disney, and now she's like headlining a show. So she is kind of a freak of nature in her talents, but this is what a show headliner should be capable of. I'm just catching up with chat. Imagine an AU where High Guardian Spice was actually good and its fanbase had a rivalry with the Owl House fandom. That would be that would honestly be good. And I think it would be great to have two shows that have a lot of representation in it that can give people variety so that they don't have to kind of settle for, well, this is the cartoon that's airing at the moment which has the representation. So this is the one I have to be a fan of because I have no other choice. If there were cartoons that had representation and could give people choice, we could then be like, there's competition. So it pushes the cartoons to have better writing because suddenly you can't just have representation and have like a built-in audience and then not have good writing because those people are going to watch you anyway because you don't have any competition to push you to make a better product, if that makes sense. This looks like fan art, not a work of a showrunner. Yeah, exactly. And because it's fine, but it's something I would expect to see on DeviantArt. And I don't mean that as a diss to DeviantArt. DeviantArt is great. But it doesn't look like something a showrunner would do. This is the person in charge of the show. This is the head. This is your captain of your military squadron. This is the person you go to and say, I am having a problem with this part of animation. Can you please help me do it better? Just, again, for comparison, this is another one of Kiana's drawings that she just did in her free time. This isn't even official. This is just something she did because she thought it was fun. Amaryllis deserves a better nose. All the characters deserve better noses in High Guardian Spice. They try to do the anime thing where they kind of just give a slight suggestion of a nose. But as I said in the first live stream I did, what they do then is it robs the characters from having any kind of anchor to their face. And then you have characters like Sage where her mouth goes very high up and it almost touches her eyes because there's nothing to separate her mouth from her eyes because there's no nose to be like, okay, this is the dividing line. Not even this is nearly as bad as Butch Hartman, but it still kind of reminds me of it. Listen, Butch Hartman does a very valuable service to society because it makes indie people who sell art for commissions, it makes them go, Butch Hartman charges $200 for his sketches and they look like this. Therefore, me charging $50 for my much better art is perfectly reasonable. That is a very valid service that Butch Hartman does to the art community. Do you have a link to more of her work? I'm digging those Team Rocket pictures. Oh yeah, sure. Let me just find her on Tumblr. I know she's on Twitter as well, but I spend more time on Tumblr, so I tend to kind of know how to find people on Tumblr more. Kiana's great, by the way. I don't know her personally at all, but her art is so good. Okay, they are pasted her Tumblr in chat, so feel free to look at her art. She's very, very good. She's currently directing, what's the show called? See, it's a show I don't watch, so I forget what it's called. me see if I can find it quick. Where is your announcement for when you got promoted? I can't find it right now, but she recently got promoted on the show she's working on. And I mean, she honestly deserves it. She's really talented. It's really shocking how good she is. Actually, here, I'm gonna remove Team Rocket, and let me add the one she did of... Here we go. Because I love this drawing so much. Transition. There we go. I was actually, like I said, I was going to do a part of the first High Guardian Spice video I wanted to do, talking about the art style and talking about Rodriguez's skills as an illustrator, as a showrunner compared to people like Kiana, but I ended up not doing it because I also don't want to be mean, so I don't want to point at Rodriguez's art and be like, look at this schlub, you know, but... I do feel that there's a very big difference in skill level, and it would be fine if he was just an animator. If he was just an animator working on a big production, that would honestly be fine, but the problem comes from him being the showrunner. That is why I felt it was worth mentioning, but I ended up not putting it in the video because it didn't really end up being super relevant, and I didn't want to bring it up just to kind of, I don't know, it felt a bit like I was making fun of him, and I wasn't super comfortable with that. I think it is a worthwhile point to discuss, but I do feel maybe not worthwhile enough to bring up in a review. It was much more important to point out that female dwarves should have beards. Like, that is a topic that I am much more passionate about than Rodriguez's art skills. I'd much rather just rant about that for like 5 minutes than talk about Rodriguez's art skills. It is odd how Butchie only ever talked about Fairly Odd Parents and Danny Phantom for the most part, but he seems to have been a writer in Johnny Bravo and Dexter's Lab, if I recall. Wonder why he never brought that up in his vids. I think it's because with Dexter's Lab is very much the baby of Craig McCracken and Tartakovsky, Gendy Tartakovsky. Like, they were the two heads for Dexter's Lab. Whereas Butch Hartman might have just been a crew member. Whereas Danny Phantom and Fairly Odd Parents, those were his babies. Those were the shows he conceptualized and sold to the studio and told them, this is the show I want to make. That's why he's much more passionate about those two. And it's also because they were super, super popular, and especially Fairly Odd Parents ran for like, what, 12 years or something. So he doesn't really bring up some of his bombs and his shows that flopped, because he rather wants to talk about the shows that did well, which is fine. I mean, everybody does that in a professional sense. You put your best show forward. But I think that's why he doesn't talk about Dexter's Lab and Johnny Bravo so much, is because they weren't his shows. They were just shows he worked on. Ray needs to humble himself a little so he can refine his skills, both in writing and drawing. Yeah. And see, that's a big problem, and I think it's a problem with the industry as a whole. Because here's the thing, and it's a difficult subject to talk about just in live stream, because I feel like it's a subject that's important enough that I should write down my thoughts and really get down what I want to say properly, so I'm not accidentally saying something offensive or I get quoted out of context. But I do feel that a lot of these show writers, they hide behind representation to mask their skills, and then they kind of put up this barrier where you can't criticize them, because if you do, you get lumped in with like what do the Americans say, like all the racists and the sexists and the homophobes. They kind of put you in that camp as soon as you criticize them, but then because they do that, they're not given any opportunity to improve, because they've got the shield up, like you can't criticize them. And it's not just the general public, because the general public are much more willing to actually point out the problems. But in a professional sense, like studios and stuff, especially the people that aren't on the creative team, that are the people who like invest the money and stuff, they're not creative people. So they only understand demographics and marketing and things like that. So it's easier for them to come up to them and say, hey, I've got the show that, I have the show that has a lot of representation in it. And then those people go, oh, that will be good for our network because it'll make us look progressive. And it's a big giant kind of a clusterfuck where quality of writing is not the focus and representation is used as a selling point and a shield, and it ends up that you kind of miss the point of just being a good writer, which it doesn't matter what your show is about. It doesn't matter if it has representation or not. Good writing is good writing. And if you want to have representation in your show, you can absolutely do that. But please focus on the fundamentals of writing, because that's going to be the same regardless of what your subject matter is. And I think that's something a lot of people have kind of lost sight of. And because representation is something a lot of networks want, they're willing to hire people with lesser skill who might have an idea that they think they can market. And it creates this atmosphere where people aren't pushed to improve. Fantasy races don't have to live under the shadow of Tolkien, but some standards would be nice. Yeah, I do agree. And I very, very briefly made a flash of that in the last video I uploaded last week, where I was talking about dwarves and beards. But oh, I've got music happening at the same time as me talking about this. Where Morrowind is my favorite Elder Scrolls game, because Morrowind has a fantasy setting unlike any other fantasy setting I've seen, where most of its fantasy creatures are bugs and lizards and things, and it's got giant mushrooms, and it's got strange, like, alien backstories, and it's got demons and things. And then when Oblivion came out, Lord of the Rings was in theaters, so Bethesda went, oh, if we make Oblivion more like Lord of the Rings, we will sell a lot of games, which is what ended up happening. But as a result, Oblivion is very much a Tolkien-style fantasy game, and then Skyrim is also just a Tolkien-style fantasy game, Viking-flavored. They're already perfect, you just need to accept them. That mindset is in need of some serious retrospect. Yeah, I think you mean introspection, but it is true. Again, this is a subject I feel I should get down in writing and really talk my mind on. And I'll see how, I'm going to say how worthwhile it is to make a video like that, because if I do open up that line of discussion, I will have to accept the fact that there will be people in the comments who feel attacked because I am critically talking about a subject matter that affects them in a real world sense. And it's difficult to kind of want to talk about it and knowing that you might end up upsetting people, and then I, as the creator, have to accept that I will be getting a lot of angry rebuttal to what I'm saying, which I can handle, but it's like, do I want to kind of put that on myself, especially when I'm just kind of starting out, because that might be a storm of negativity which might not be worth going into right now, but it might be a topic of conversation at a later date. So it's a big subject that needs you to really think through it and decide, is this worth getting into a big argument into in the comments? And I'm not somebody where I'm like, oh, I'll just turn off the comments, because it's like, no, the comments are there for a reason. I want to interact with the people watching the video. Otherwise, what's the point? I'm just standing on a stage yelling and nobody's allowed to say anything back. And I don't think that's a great way to make content, because talking about content is a conversation you're having. So there's no point getting on stage and being like, this is what I think, you're not allowed to think anything, listen to what I think, okay, bye. Like, that's just, you can do it that way, but I don't know. I don't think that's the way I want to do it, is what I'm trying to say. My criticism is more for people who use it as a shield, opposed to the target demographic, yes. But it's very difficult when you're a person, especially if you're an American, where this is a very big issue in the real world at the moment. So people have a lot of emotion wrapped up in the very topic, and it's an important subject that requires care when you discuss it. And coming out and saying this show that has representation in it is bad and the people use representation as a shield, like, that's not a constructive argument to have if you're having an environment that is so volatile at the moment. I'm not sure if I'm communicating that correctly. What I'm trying to say is just it's a very important subject that requires care and careful thought to discuss it. And if I were to make a video about it, I'd have to think about my wording very carefully and have to accept that no matter how carefully I word myself, there will still be people who feel personally attacked by a video like that simply because of the circumstances of how they grew up and where they live. And those feelings of feeling like they're attacked are upsetting, and they're valid feelings to have, even though that's not my intention. So I would just have to accept that would be something that happens. So I would need to be emotionally prepared that when I post a video like that, I'm going to get backlash from a certain group in the audience. And am I willing to navigate that? And at the moment, I'm not really, because quite frankly, I'm working and my job takes a lot of mental energy, and I'm often tired in the evening, so I don't want to sit online and argue with a bunch of younger people about a serious topic like this, because I just don't have the energy, quite frankly. So when I do have the energy, I'll tackle it a little bit more in depth. I can even tell now how you're being careful regarding the subject. Yeah, because I don't want to come across like representation is bad when, like, all my favorite media tends to very prominently be about queer characters. Like, my favorite anime, it's not actually Sailor Moon, it's Revolutionary Girl Utena is my favorite anime of all time, and I don't think there is a single character in that entire show who is straight. Not a single one. And my second favorite anime is Sailor Moon, and I don't think there's a single character in Sailor Moon who is straight. No, you know what? The cats. The cats are straight. Everyone else in that show is queer. So it's not like I'm sitting here and saying, no, representation is bad, because then I literally wouldn't have anything to watch. Even if you had the energy for that, not wanting to argue with those is still a fair choice. Yeah, it's just that I tend to be somebody where I'm pretty good at having conversations with people online when they're in an agitated state. Because I've had people send me asks on Tumblr where they're very clearly upset about something I've said, or they've misinterpreted what I'm saying and they're very angry. And I tend to be somebody who's pretty good on the internet, at least, take a step back and look at the conversation and still have my guard up, like, is this person just being an asshole? But are they actually speaking to me from a place of hurt feelings? Because if that's the case, then it's more constructive for me to remain calm and try and figure out what it is that's upset them, and then just kind of tell them that I'm sorry to have hurt their feelings, rather than to get into a big argument about the subject. Because even if we disagree on the subject matter, it's more important that I don't hurt people's feelings, because that's not really what I'm out here to do. I'm not here to trigger somebody into getting angry or upset, because again, I don't mind if you have a different opinion than me, but I don't want to be here and say something that gets somebody into an agitated, angry state. But in order to do that, talking and working through those emotions, I do need to have the energy to do it. And after working for, how long do I work a day? 9, 10, 11, 12. I work 9 hours a day, which isn't super, it's not like the craziest amount of hours, but, you know, you're working a full-time job, 9 hours a day for 5 days a week. you don't want to spend the last few hours of the day arguing with people on the internet. There's more constructive things to do with your time. As someone who's trying to make multiple original series, I take High Guardian Space as a cautionary tale. Yeah, because, and again, I think that's what makes it interesting. Is I'm somebody where I feel you can learn a lot more from a bad show or movie than you can from a good show or movie. And it's because things that are done well in shows, we take for granted or we don't even notice them because they're done well. And the thing about animation is you don't want the audience to see the person animating. You want to kind of hide all of that and make them invested in the world and believe in the world. So very often things done well in a good show we don't even see. But when it's done badly in a bad show, it sticks out very, very obviously. So you can learn a lot more from it because then you see, oh, that's what happens if I don't do that correctly. I think another thing about High Guardian Spices, which I don't really go into because, again, I don't want to attack any of the show creators, but I also feel that because Rosemary is a big self-insert for Rodriguez, he's unwilling for Rosemary to have a lot of faults, and because he's unwilling for Rosemary to have a lot of faults, she ends up being a very one-dimensional character. So I think it's also a cautionary tale of even if you have a character in a show who is a self-insert, you are going to have to let some of your ego die and let that self-insert character have flaws and things that make them not a perfect person. Because if you have a self-insert character, you're going to have to accept that that character has to have flaws. Because otherwise you end up with Rosemary, who is... There's nothing to that character, and I think it's because Rodriguez was unwilling to give her faults. Other than, like, very superficial ones. The issue is when a show is made for a single superficial reason and nothing else, like the horrible NFT monkey show. Oh no, let's not talk about the NFT monkey show. I find it hysterical that that's a thing that exists, but... oh no. I've seen one YouTuber call her a Mary Sue in one bit. I don't really like the term Mary Sue because I don't mind it when people use it to describe a character because I understand what they mean. However, I feel that if you're somebody criticizing media, you can't just say, oh, she's a Mary Sue and expect people to fully understand what you mean. And that's why I prefer saying, well, she's very obviously a self-insert for Rodriguez. And she's a one-dimensional character because Rodriguez is unwilling to give his self-insert character flaws because of his ego. And that doesn't mean he has a big ego, it just means he's insecure like most of us are, and I think he's like in his 20s or something. So that also would make sense. So she is a Mary Sue, however, those are the reasons why she's a Mary Sue. She's not just a Mary Sue in that she's an overpowered character who everybody automatically likes. She's a Mary Sue for very specific reasons. And I think that it's worthwhile to explain the specific reasons rather than just say, oh, she's a Mary Sue and moving on. It's more interesting to kind of talk about why she is called a Mary Sue. It's similar to like how Rey from the Star Wars sequels is a Mary Sue. Similar but not really, because Rey isn't a self-insert. However, she was also a character where the writers didn't want to give her any real faults because she was their flagship to these new Star Wars movies. So she wasn't allowed to have any faults or have any weaknesses and things like that, which makes her very uninteresting. Thank you. Oh, you can't see my art. I'm saying thank you for Kiana's art. I'm so sorry. Let me put time back on screen. There we go. Rosemary is strangely detached from the show. People run around doing stuff and she just happens to be there with the sword all the time. Yeah, like... I'm going to talk about it a little bit later, but you would think her mom Lavender would be the sole focus of the show, but she's not, and so Rosemary has nothing to do, like literally nothing to do. And because she's not interested in schoolwork, like she doesn't like studying, she doesn't like classes, she doesn't like homework, she's at the academy and she's not interested in the academy. She's got nothing to do with the rot. Her mother being missing doesn't tie into the main plot in any way whatsoever, and she's not interested in doing schoolwork at the academy she's at. Why are you here? I think Literature Devil put it best. A Mary Sue exists when the world revolves around them, as opposed to them adhering to the world they live in. Yes, that is the actual definition of a Mary Sue. Oh, I kind of lost my train of thought. But the other reason why I don't really like the term Mary Sue is because it's very often applied to fan fiction. And the thing about fan fiction is you're not writing it to get it published. You're not writing it to impress people. You're writing it because you want to write a scenario. And if you want to put in a self-insert Mary Sue character because you're a 13-year-old girl and you want something to kind of give you a confidence boost and make you happy and just kind of make you feel good about yourself, that's fine. You should be allowed to do that without a bunch of people on the internet going, oh my word, this character is such a Mary Sue. That's the other reason. But that's kind of a whole different topic because we're talking about a professionally made show that people paid money to have air. Lavender being a twist villain for the sake of a cliffhanger was kind of dumb. Yeah, I'm going to talk about that in part 4 as well. And again, I'm not even going to talk about that now because that is like an entire topic unto itself. But it's extremely arrogant of Rodriguez to do that. Because he made season 1 where he didn't even have an idea of what the plot was. And he automatically assumed while making season 1 that he would automatically get a season 2. That's why that twist is there. And it's incredibly arrogant. Do you know how many people would kill to have one season of their show get made? And you got that one season to make your show. And you did nothing with it and then expected a season 2. Like, it's astonishing. My throat is a little sore, so I'm not going to go for too much longer. We'll go for 10 more minutes because then it's going to be 11 o'clock here. So I'm going to stay on for about 10 more minutes because I think that's about as much as my throat can handle. And I'm guzzling this water now. Maybe next time we do a live stream, I'll actually draw Lavender. Because I don't want to draw Rosemary. And I'm struggling to find references for Amaryllis's character. She's got like a very intricate bracelet design, which is funny while I was looking for screenshots because I thought maybe I'd draw her tonight. And she very often has her arms crossed or her arms behind her back. And I think they do that so that they don't have to draw her bracelets. It's very funny. Because she can't be drawn without her bracelets because that's where her terror sphere is. So she needs to have her bracelets. Let me see what else I have to show you guys. Oh, I do have this drawing. I think I still have this drawing. Yes, I do. Again, this is not something I'm going to mention in the actual reviews because I don't want to come across like I'm attacking anybody. But this is Rodriguez's character sheet that he drew of himself before he transitioned. And I'm going to... And the reason I'm showing you this is because I want to show you it next to Rosemary, just so you guys can understand why people call Rosemary a self-insert. Dodging Rosemary and Sage joined fair. I thought Amaryllis or Snapdragon would follow before those two for next fan arts. Yeah, I considered Snapdragon actually, just because I really, really like her. And Amaryllis, but like I said, I thought Amaryllis, but then I couldn't find a good picture of her with her bracelets. And I was like, oh lord, I'm gonna have to do some like actual searching because the model sheets just don't exist. So I'm gonna have to look through all my screenshots to try and find a proper reference for that. Oh dear. yeah, it's pretty blatant when you see it on screen. But again, I felt uncomfortable bringing up Ray Rodriguez pre-transition because I know that can be quite painful for people. So I didn't really want to bring it up in a proper review because I didn't think that was nice, quite frankly. But it's one of those things where it's stuck in my brain and I can't unsee it. So I thought I'd just show you guys why people specifically say Rosemary is a giant self-insert. And this is why. Aside from all the other reasons, this is one of the big reasons. So let me get this straight. Ray has 2 self-inserts. Yes. Yes, he does. Because Professor Caraway looks very similar to how he does now. And aside from that, Professor Caraway also looks a lot like one of his OCs, which he kind of has a yaoi story that he's writing, which is how he describes it. I'm not calling it a yaoi, that's what he calls it. And the character that he ships his OC with in that yaoi story is seen in the show flirting with Professor Caraway at one point. Do I have dislikes on the video? I can't see it right now, but alright, well, oh well, thank you for interacting with the live stream, I really appreciate it. Let me just get this off screen as well, because again, I don't really want to bully Ray, it's an interesting point, and yeah, it's Gloria something. I'm not going to go searching for it right now because I don't want to put him on blast. But that's kind of his other pet project. You know what? Maybe that not becoming a show or a book is a good thing because after High Guardian Spice, maybe that'll give him time to really work through his skills and help him build upon what he's already good at, so that by the time he tries to publish or turn whatever that project is into something marketable, he'll be at a point where it'll really be a very good product. Like, hopefully that's what he does with those OCs, because he's made a show. Regardless of how the show was received, he made a show and it got broadcast. So that's something he can put on his CV. He can say, hey, I made a show. It was picked up by Crunchyroll, 12 episodes, it aired, we got it done in time. So the reception will probably affect the CV a little bit, but he's not going to get run out of the animation industry because he had a flop, you know. Again, we were talking about Butch Hartman earlier, but so if he just takes time and works on that story a little bit more and gives it time and brews it a little bit more and works on the story and the writing and the characters, maybe that can be something that turns out into a really good project if he ever decides to take it into the direction of a book or a show or a movie or whatever. Then he might be able to turn that into like a really, really good property. Having greenlighted a show is an achievement of its own. It really is. Like, even though I think Crunchyroll standards were slightly low because Crunchyroll was trying to launch its own project of Crunchyroll originals and they needed shows to fill Crunchyroll originals. And Ray Rodriguez came with this concept and character designs and it had a lot of representation. I can see Crunchyroll being like, oh, this will be really good for a first show. And then when there was all the backlash when the trailer dropped, they sat on it and launched the other shows first. But the fact that Rodriguez has a show and the show is out and the show even has merchandise, they sell like pins and things, that is a really big point in his favor for future projects. Regardless really of how the show was received, the show was done. The show was delivered. I'm all for second chances, though I haven't seen their other show. Yeah, I haven't seen his other show either, but High Guardian Spice has issues, but it's not like it's this horrible, completely offensive thing that was made, which makes me go, Lord, I hope this person is never allowed to make anything again. Like, it's not that. It's just kind of a mediocre show. A lot of people turn it into this big controversy or this big horrible thing that happened, and it's like, no, guys, it's just a show that came out and it was kind of bad. That's it, really. It's not really that deep. And I mean, a lot of famous people that are like big names in the industry these days have shows that were not great when they came out or flopped for some or other reason outside of their control. Like even Gendy Tartakovsky has a flop or two under his belt, and it's not because, in his case, it's not because the show was bad, it's because of nonsense with when Cartoon Network aired it and things like that. But it's not like every single thing that even the best animators do is an instant success. So him being like, hey, this is like the third job I ever had in the industry, and I got to do an entire show, and I delivered on time. That's a big point in his favor. So I really hope he moves forward and like really builds upon what he's learned. Because I'm sure this show, regardless of what his thoughts were while he was making it, I'm sure it was a massive learning experience, and it taught him a lot. Regardless of where he stands now with skill level, I'm sure the experience and the interaction with people online gave him experience that he can now carry forward. And I really hope he manages to do better, because I think he does have the potential. I just think he's not experienced, and that's all it is. It's not even that he's bad, he's just inexperienced. It's not like it's the Nut Shack or anything. No, it is not the Nut Shack. It's not, what's the Rhapsody Christmas Kits, like that horrible thing? It's not that. It's not the Nut Shack. It's not, I don't know, I'm blanking. I've seen some garbage shows get talked about on YouTube that are like honestly horrible. Or that one show that actually aired about that genius 8-year-old, and he wanted to bang his teacher or something. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? There was a show, it was like an adult animated show, and it was this character who was basically a Stewie Griffin knockoff who wanted to bang his teacher, who was like 80 years old. Like, the High Guardian Spice isn't that. It's just a mediocre show. To all High Guardian Spice flaws, the PR of the first trailer, I wonder if it was out of the creator's hands. Ray could really take all the ton of critique and feedback and make a comic series good with the brand. Yes, the trailer that was dropped was not Rodriguez's fault at all. Crunchyroll released a trailer of what they wanted to do with Crunchyroll Originals way too early. They had nothing to show about the show itself, and all they had to show for it was, look, we have a brand new studio, and it's only women except for Rodriguez, who's a trans man. Look at how progressive we are. And that immediately made people really angry, especially because they didn't want Crunchyroll to take their subscription money and open their own studio. They wanted the Japanese animators to get paid, because Japanese animators don't get paid. Sorry if I popped the mic there. Oddly enough, High Guardian Spice has lowest score on IMDb compared to the Nut Shack, which is actually ridiculous. It is, and I'm guessing that's just because it's the popular thing to hate. It's the popular thing to get angry about. And as much as I think it is using representation as a shield, and most of its hate comes from the fact that it's a bad show, there is a large demographic of people who just hate it because it's progressive. And whether that's because they are bigoted themselves, or it's just because they're frustrated by that sort of show getting greenlit the whole time, I do feel a lot of the hate is very unfair. And it comes from an unfair, kind of nasty place. Alan Gregory! Yeah, that's the show. Do not watch Alan Gregory. That is an actually offensive show. Like, why did this get made? I hope the person who makes this never makes an animated cartoon. That's Alan Gregory. High Guardian Spice is not Alan Gregory. It's not even close. You think you had that adult cartoon blocked from memory? Yeah, it's for the best. Like, the Nut Shack is kind of funny, because the Nut Shack, like the people who made the Nutcheck, if you watch some of the documentaries, they just seem like nice guys. They just kind of wanted to make a South Park cartoon, and they weren't very good at it because they'd never made a cartoon before. There's an innocence to the Nutcheck despite its subject matter. But Alan Gregory, that is an honestly disgusting show where I hate that exists. I hate that this is a cartoon that exists. Okay, it's 11, so I'm going to take one more question and then I need to stop and like take a lozenge or something. And finish my water. I should talk to myself more so that I can go for longer in these live streams. You know, Vinny Vinesauce, he does live streams where he will be on live for like 5 hours. And when Vinny was streaming every single night or every day of the week for 5 hours on live stream talking, I don't know how he does it. Why does Rosemary never use magic? I was actually thinking about that today. Rosemary says in episode 2, Parsley says that Rosemary is taking the warrior path, like as if it's like a character creation screen in a video game. She says that Rosemary is taking the path of the warrior, which is what Parsley is also doing, and Sage is taking the path of magic. So that's why Rosemary doesn't have any magic classes. But her sword is also enchanted because the metal can't break on the blade itself. The hilt can break, but the metal can't. So, yeah, it's like, wouldn't Rosemary want to learn basic magic just to kind of fix the sword's handle? Like, you see Caraway do in episode 2, you see Caraway use magic. No, episode 3, to fix the sword when the hilt breaks. You'd think that that's the kind of thing that Rosemary might be interested in. But again, the second you start asking questions about the magic system, it becomes a worthless point because the answer is always going to be they didn't think about it. They didn't think it over. They didn't give it any kind of development whatsoever. Martial sorcery, yeah. A magic knight of sorts would have been ideal for her. Yeah, she could be like, again, if you want to look at video games, she could be like a paladin, like in Final Fantasy. Or no, not like in D&D, because I think Paladin can do like basic white magic in D&D, I think. My experience with D&D is mostly video games based on D&D, not D&D itself. Yeah, the magic is just broken. It's not even that it's broken, it's just that it's not developed. And it's fine for things like Harry Potter, where Harry Potter started out as like a children's book, so it didn't matter that the magic made no sense. But High Guardian Spice is a show which bases a lot of its character and events on how the magic system works, and then it didn't figure out how the magic system works. So the whole thing kind of falls apart. Whereas in Harry Potter, it's just like, ooh, we are wizards and we can make things float and we can transform into animals. You know, it's magic is just kind of used for fun because the book started out being for children. And that's why it's fine there, but it doesn't work in a show like High Guardian Spice, where it wants to be like, it kind of wants to be like Madoka Magica, but it wants to be like Little Witch Academia. It wants to be a lot of things without figuring anything out. Yeah, it's like it wanted to be in the middle of hard and soft magic, and then they screwed up. Yeah, because you can have a soft magic system, but then don't make the function of the magic system be the defining character trait of one of your main characters. In this case, Sage. Like, Sage is struggling with the magic system is the biggest problem she faces throughout the show, and it continues all the way through to episode 12. Don't make a magic system, not develop it, and then make the magic system a defining character trait of one of your main characters. It doesn't work. Either evoke the wonder of magic or explain the mechanisms behind the way magic functions, I suppose, has to be the choice. And High Guardian Spice said no. The new magic, it seems open to use by everyone because it doesn't need to work hard with. Yeah, it's not hard, which again, it's I don't understand why Sage is struggling with it, and the show never explains why Sage is struggling with it outside of she's not used to it. So, and that's like not a reason. It's like, okay, she's not used to it, but why is it different from the magic she already uses? What makes it different? And they never answer any of that. They just say, it's not, they don't even say it's hard, because nobody else has a problem with the magic system. Except for Parnell, but I don't understand Parnell at all. But nobody else struggles with the magic system, so it's not that it's hard, it's just that Sage can't do it because she's not used to it. Which doesn't make sense. None of it makes sense. And I am going to say goodnight because my throat is very, very sore. So I want to say thank you again for coming. I'm very sorry about not seeing the chat while I was drawing, but I tried to talk through what I was doing because frankly, I thought nobody showed up. I thought nobody showed up, and I was like, "Aw, I'll just talk to myself in case people watch this on the playback." So, thank you very much for hanging out, and thank you for asking questions. And hopefully, we can keep this up if my Patreon keeps that tier going. And because I really enjoy these, I'd like to do these more. And as long as I have incentive to do them, because I have to take time off to do them in between my real job, we will keep doing them. And I hope everyone had fun. And I will say goodbye and turn on in OBS. I'm still trying to learn how to do this OBS thing. And I will put on the ending screen, or song as it is. It's Dark Frost Star says, what I'm guessing, because I don't understand the kanji in the middle, but I'm guessing it's Jane. So, ataimite, and I shall see you guys next time. It's okay, Sleepy. That it's just my program that failed me, and me just going like, oh, okay, and not double check. Thank you for the super chat. Thanks for the cozy stream. We'll be looking forward to the next one. Thank you so much. That is my first super chat. Thank you. And now I gotta go before I say goodbye for like 10 minutes. Bye, guys.